So the Q&A got here. Let's dive right into the general facts of the series of the Spirit ships from Crusader. So we right off the bat, big hit here, no docking. So the ships will not be permitted to dock with another ship, which means that right off the bat, especially the E1 where you have 6 VIPs on board, they will without a doubt need EVA gear to hop off and go to another ship. So this basically makes it rather impractical for those uses. However, as the Q&A notes, it is a small enough ship for that not to be an issue if, say, you're going to a hangar on, say, a station or planet side or outpost side. So do consider that, though, that you cannot dock. Also, the ships are not modular. We basically have confirmed, but they didn't exactly say these words, that there's 2 crew beds. And specifically, there is a small kitchen and hygiene facilities for the crew that are in a shared common space just behind the cockpit. The SCU on the E1 and the A1 are not official, and basically they've acknowledged that players will get creative at the only entrance to all 3 of the ships being the entrance ramp. But specifically on the E1 and the A1, that entrance ramp is the only area that you will be able to put cargo or supplies. Now, I will addendum that with the E1 having in its image area for VIP luggage and VIP lockers for the 6 VIPs that will be happily upstairs drinking off the Mixmaster and viewing the sights. However, when you're not running these VIPs, that area would be usable for, say, box missions or something like that. Obviously, it'll have to be tested, but it will be reassuring that the E1 specifically has that capability. The A1 does trade some utility obviously for the 5-5 bespoke bomb racks. More about that in a little bit. Unfortunately, the Q&A did not cover any armor differences, if there is any, and how strong armor-wise the ship is. They did note that the remote tractor beam and turret is based upon a remote status that is operated by the co-pilot. And anecdotally, me and Mason checked out the hologram for the Spirit series of ships and noted there's tremendous rail systems that run from the top of the vessel to the back, absolute back of the vessel. And these rail systems are extremely overbuilt, reminiscent of the Scorpius and even larger ships. I think of even the Javelin style remote system for its large ship, the ship turret. And it can't help but think that's not a rule of cool type factor like some of the other aesthetics on the ship. I think it's more meant to allow, especially the remote size 3 tractor beam, to move from the top of the ship to the far back where it can kind of peek into the cargo area and manipulate itself to be manipulated by the crew for 48 SCU to be unloaded and loaded onto the ship more gracefully. Also, that tractor beam would be quite handy to bring things to the ship from the general area by moving itself back up on top. I think also it'll help with, say, hangar access and some other tight quarters areas if you were able to, say, turn this on and off just by somebody flipping up the system on the co-pilot seat. Also noted was that the co-pilot can operate the chin-mounted twin size 2 gimbal weapons that, size 3 size 3 is what the actual mount is, but the twin size 2 gimbaled weapon system that is on there, which means it can go side to side within reason, not quite like a turret, but it can move a bit to kind of deal with faster moving threats, can be tasked to the co-pilot seat if the pilot wishes. So that's nice and handy, especially if you're in a 2-up configuration with a friend or a workmate or a family member, and you're looking to kind of pitch in on the fight. That's quite nice. All 3 ships have those size 3s. With the changes to the ship pages that we've seen in the more recent days, the C1 was confirmed to have that size 3 mount with the twin size 2 gimbal, just like the E1 and the A1, which was something I wasn't able to kind of confirm in the previous discussion, because it was not exactly like that. It just simply was a twin size 2 gimbal. Now, let's kind of dive into each ship a little bit more. And I guess one other thing to really talk about before we do is that the ships have been larger based on the brochure page to be 43.5 meters wide, or 142.7 feet wide, and 46.5 meters long, or 152.5 feet long. I say it in those ways to just reiterate how large this ship is and help you visualize it, no matter where you are in the world, to really visualize how large this ship is. Now, CIG has stated in the Q&A that this ship will be more maneuverable than it would be expected, and it still kind of is hinting that it's comparing it to a Cutlass or a Freelancer. But these ships are, the Spirit series has grown dramatically in size. So I caution anyone who has thought of having a fleet, say around a cap ship, like, oh, I'm going to park this thing on my Liberator or something like that. This is not possible. It is perfect for a Kraken, and that was one of my assessments in my previous video, was to have I could see a pair of A1s and a few Gladius acting as a strike force that can be sent planet or moon side to basically strike out at an outpost or a mining operation or something you want to discourage. But I think carefully about trying to plan this ship like as if it is a Freelancer or Cutlass size. It is not. Physically, it is a larger ship. Even if it's more fuel efficient and it flies well in atmo and it maneuvers like a smaller ship, it still has a very large footprint. So do bear that in mind if you're not planning to live out of a station or basically operating out of a spaceport or something like that, where the size will not even be noticed. I mean, larger ships are going to be operating. So just something to get in the back of your mind when you think of these ships. So now let's go into the specific ships. So the C1 Spirit, once again, we have the size 3 tractor beam. We've confirmed that it's co-pilot controlled, and that CIG stated they will explore allowing a turret to replace the tractor beam. I'm assuming the size 2 rear-facing remote turrets off the E1 or the A1, but I would urge that it is unlikely, and it should not be part of your purchasing decisions, or if it's your goal to buy this in game decisions. Just assume it has the tractor beam and operate as necessary. I've had a lot of comment discussions in my previous video about how this ship will not fare well against a smaller, more maneuverable opponent. And I do agree with the assessment, especially with the master modes changes coming in soon, that this ship will have to flee instead of fight or flight. It will have to fly. It will have to fly. I do stress, though, that it does have a reasonable amount of weaponry that's forward facing. And if you are not alone, say a pair of C1s even, suddenly it would not be so easy to crack a C1 that is trying to stand up and fight. Also, a less maneuverable ship, that's not a dedicated combat fighter, you would be able to do a reasonable amount of damage to. A pair of twin size 3 cannons, until you unload all 4 of your missiles, especially if you time them well and you don't have many countermeasures counter them, and then those size 2 twin gimbaled, that's a pretty reasonable amount of damage if you can get it on target, especially until you've exasperated all your missiles. So just something to remember in the back of your mind, though, that tractor beam does limit you, where if something is extremely maneuverable, it can get in behind you and not be hit by all this weaponry that you have. It is noted that they and confirmed that it is the only ship in this series that can handle a small vehicle up to a Cyclone, which officially the other variants do not support. And what I mean by that is the other variants will have things put in them, such as Noxes. I think of the Ranger bikes possibly. I think maybe not Dragonfly. Those are very long. Everybody mentions the Dragonfly, but it doesn't really scrunch up too well. Maybe the X1, when that comes out, we'll have to see how that the final stats and size on that thing is. But also, as I mentioned before, it does enjoy a reasonable weapons complement. I'm not going to go into that all over again. And one size 2 shield. It does have very good atmospheric handling, and it is supposedly more maneuverable than expected for its size. So I do expect this ship to be quite a winner, especially at its price point, being like a 5 USD upgrade over the Cutlass Black, depending on if you're talking Warbond or not. I think this is a great ship, and if you happen to be listening to this after this sale, this is certainly something to think about for IAE. Don't forget, these ships come up multiple times. If you're on the fence about picking this ship up, don't forget you can pick up a $5 or $10 USD upgrade, sit on that CCU upgrade, and then apply it later when this ship comes out, and you can make that decision. Hey, I like this ship. Hey, I'm not too fond of it, and just melt that and get yourself a paint or put that towards another ship. It never hurts to keep yourself keeping options open in this game. So the E1 is up next. As I talked about before, we have the twin rear-facing size 2 remote turret that's co-pilot controlled. Once again, you have the 6 executive seats with the personal lockers. The lockers have become even more valuable now that we have confirmed that it has 0 official SCU of storage space for cargo. I will note that in the past, CIG has made a differentiation between official cargo space and personal storage space. However, that line gets blurred every single day. There's more and more pickable loot that allows you to, that your character can wear or trade or make use of, or even sell, especially down the line, that can be stored in personal locations. So I stress to not worry too much about the nomenclature and just appreciate that you do have storage on the E1 that you not necessarily going to have on the A1. It's not as perfect as the C1's very large storage area, but what are you going to do? It does have the Mixmaster Drink Maker, which has, it's not as unique as we thought it was going to be, based on the fact that we have those common areas we talked about earlier, i.e. the small kitchen, on all 3 ships. So that goes without saying that there will be some type of hydration and I would assume drink storage and such for the crew. However, the Mixmaster obviously is a much better step. And if you're into the Starliner series of ships that are coming up soon, you would appreciate being able to test it out and be one of the beta testers for this new drink system. The panoramic windows are still valuable. I think that's an intangible, whether if you're into that or not. I prefer those type of things. I enjoy having those atmospherics. The extra toilet and shower for VIP passengers is actually on the lower level. A lot of us theory crafted it was going to be up with the seats. They put it down with the storage areas, and I think it's a good move. I stand by my assessment before that I would not want to have random passengers, whether they're VIPs or not, heading into the flight deck and into places where crew are sleeping. I think it's a wise decision to keep them separated and have some type of secure door between the 2 locations. I think of this thing as a Learjet, and the passengers being just random people, are still paying customers, even if they are rich, should really stay on the other side of that door, so to speak. This is a nice touch. I think it's also pretty cool when you're not carrying around VIP passengers that you have this hygiene mechanism closer to the back door, which is the only entrance and exit. I should have mentioned that earlier, and I'll keep mentioning it just to kind of cover my bases. But if there will be places in this verse that are not too kind, they're toxic locations. We have pictures of nitrogen and other types of goo pools that are not exactly the greatest things to be in, but there might be valuable assets in those places. Having an extra toilet and shower that you're able to just kind of walk into and shower yourself off, that's not where you sleep, not where you're flying, and you can just leave your gear back there, is quite nice. I would recommend cleaning up afterwards, because you might have some VIPs come through and they might be very curious about the new mold growing on the floor, but it's a nice little touch. Once again, I value a lot of these things, even if it's just for RP, but it actually could have some real in-game tangibles in the future, and that makes it even more exciting to me. Once again, we do not know how much SCU or vehicle size that we have. That small entrance area, CIG even admitted themselves that players will just shove vehicles in there. I'm thinking bikes. And the SCU would be in your entrance area there, in theory, but it's going to bounce around a little bit. Or more practical is the luggage areas and the personal lockers that are for your VIPs. When they're not there, use them. And finally, last but certainly not least, the A1. Once again, a twin rear-facing size 2 remote turret that's co-pilot controlled. And I say rear-facing because CIG said in the Q&A it is not able to fire forward. It's a key differentiator between this and other styles of turrets that are remotes. And they noted that the 10 size 5 bombs are dumb, high explosive bombs. The bespoke launchers are basically able to just handle these kind of bombs, and no other bomb options are being planned at this time. But CIG noted if there was new versions of the size 5 and if they would fit these launchers, they would certainly allow you to use them. There is an unknown SCU vehicle size, as we spoke about with the E1. The entrance area is the same style. All 3 ships have the same single entrance and exit. This is actually something that some players are going to find a deal breaker. We have on the MSR, for example, a single entrance and exit, and it was such a kerfuffle that some players were pushing for a golden pass just to add a second exit to the MSR for emergencies or for just for RP value, and also for anti-griefing. Other players that may have disabled the vessel will just sit there waiting for someone to come out. It would be nice to have another location for you to exit through. The Corsair, for example, has an excellent solution where you can take the elevator up instead of down, and then you can be on top of the ship, and you basically have a defensible position to fire from and make sure the coast is clear. I'm not saying it's perfect. Obviously, you're exposed up there, but you're certainly not exposed from below, where somebody might be camping below your ship or around it. You might even have the height advantage there, depending on what type of FPS characteristics we're talking about. So all other general stats are the same. You have the 1 size 2 shield, you have the twin size 3 cannons, 4 missiles, and the size 3 hardpoint, but it has a twin size 2 gimbal. This is now all across all 3 ships, confirmed, and we have talked about this. As a reminder, you have the 2 crew beds, you have the small kitchen and hygiene facilities on the A1, so this certainly adds to the longevity. Now, as like a closing thoughts here, all 3 of these ships represent a new direction for Crusader Industries, not just in the naming. The Spirit is, for example, not part of the Greek mythology and this and that, but also that the Crusader company originally was built on a lure of having this humanitarian aspect to it. But with the A1 dropping size 5, 10 dumb HE bombs that aren't even bombs that are smart bombs to lessen, indirect fire that you may not want to hit and have civilian casualties and such. We're certainly seeing a departure from the original writings of Crusader Industries. The A2 is a vessel that has 4 size 10 bombs, mother of all bomb style weapon systems, or 60 size 3 bomblets that are dropped in these panels of 30 on each side. We're seeing these incredibly powerful weapons of war. The Hercules series was the first ships to carry Nova tanks into the verse and take them into the fight. So I think the A1 in particular is showing that continued departure from these humanitarian roots of the company and showing that the company is kind of all around. Now, that being said, I see the true soul of this company as logistics, and I see it as logistics with style. I look at the C1 and I think that is the Crusader I know, and I look at the E1 and I think that is like the pinnacle of what I think Crusader wishes it could be with everything, but you can only sell so many VIP transport craft. So I understand where they're coming from. I also understand the back to out of lore for a moment and think about game design. I think of CIG's position of seeing a ship that they're developing and multiple gaps that need to be filled, and maybe just some fun side grades from other ships that we have. The Cutlass, for example, being compared to the C1. It's an excellent price point, for example, even though the C1's much bigger now than the Cuddy, at least for the wing size. And I think of the fun aspects of the Crusader ships being some of the best in Atmo performance. And I think that's some really cool stuff. I think all three of these ships are a solid buy. The A1 is the least of the solid buys to me. I feel like that's more of a buying game, unless you're that kind of person who knows I'm going to be using this a lot to bomb a lot of things, and I'm going to want a lot of insurance on that without having to worry about buying it or anything else. But I think that the E1 is a solid buy, and preferably in game if you can resist the urge. And I do believe that the Starliner will have the E1 as a loaner down the road, not at first. This is the way CIG does it. To encourage sales of a new ship, they will slowly add it to the loaner list for places that it makes sense. And no, it's not a 100% chance, but it's a very high chance that that E1 will be added to the Genesis Starliners loaner list. So if you have the patience and you want to play the long game, do not get the E1. Get the CCU to a Starliner at IAE and then sit on it until the Starliner loaner list gets updated on the matrix. I'll include it in the description here if you haven't heard of this, the vehicle loaner matrix. And you will be able to get the E1, enjoy it until the Starliner comes out. Now, I will caution that I myself actually picked up an E1 because I thought the war bond is actually a pretty fair price. If you're CCUing to it, I'd also recommend that. There's some great reasons to get the E1. And I want to say also that there is some great reasons to have a Starliner and an E1 if VIP transport is truly what you're going to enjoy. Or if you enjoy hauling. You know, I've spoken with many folks who talk about the C1, the C1, the C1. You may want something that is designed to haul some form of passengers just to break up and make things still interesting. Or routes that may be heavily trafficked by hull series of ships or other specialty ships. I think of the Starfarers, for example, for liquid transport. They have a great advantage there. You know, their solid transport isn't so great, but the liquid transport is solid. Now, all of a sudden, you have the passenger-style ship to pull out of your back pocket. Maybe not necessarily the VIP one all the time, but it's certainly a good option. So the Starliner is on the much larger scale, although not necessarily long-range routes. It doesn't have to always be long-range. We're seeing commercial spaceport, commercial docking locations, I guess you'd call them. Basically, if you go down in Lorville, if you go to the Tisa Spaceport, right where you spawn the ships, there's an M50 behind you. Jump over that M50's little barrier and crouch. Look down below you. You'll see all the different commercial docking locations, I guess you'd call them. I don't know what you'd call them in space talk, but those right there are where Starliners are going to be being linked up with. So you will have these AI-based Starliners that pull up, and CIG has flirted in the past about allowing players to run routes themselves as they build reputation. I'm guessing a lot of reputation, but reputation. And players and NPCs will be lining up in those seats, waiting at the gates for their specific Starliner to go hop a flight to another location. I think the E1 represents the people who maybe make a little more UEC and want to go on a trip, and they don't want anybody else on their ship with them. I think there's going to be a lot of situations where an E1 would have like 3 customers on board, and they chartered the whole flight. And that's fine, honestly. That makes it a fun change of pace and an interesting aspect. And I love things that make any way the verse more interesting. So on to recommendations. I covered the A1, I covered the E1. Let's talk about the C1. The C1 is a very easy recommendation to buy. And buy a game, sure. Buy it now with regular money, sure. Especially if you can CCU. I keep talking about the Cuddy Black. You may be sitting there going, well, what if I don't have a Cuddy Black? If you have say, a Drake Dragonfly referral or one of those wonderful Argo Cargo referrals, if you have anything like this, take a hard look at the C1. You're talking about a, what, 45, 55 USD upgrade? And that will give you an exit plan from a ground vehicle that has extremely limited value to suddenly a ship that's 43.5 meters wide and 46.5 meters long and can carry 48 SCU and has 2 beds and full complement of hygiene and kitchen for crew. That's my definition of a pretty good all-arounder ship. And then it has a size 3 tractor beam, which is pretty dang powerful. I'm not saying it's going to go hauling ships. That's something I actually brought up with a few folks now. I've had 2 conversations about what are the topics about hauling ships with tractor beams. We don't know yet. So there is the SRV we think of that's like specially made to haul a ship. And the key difference for the SRV is that vessel is designed to haul a ship and then enter quantum with them. That's its job, is to physically take a ship that's stricken and haul it into space to a safe location with it. I don't know if it can go fast. I don't know whatever else it can do. It actually has a little compartment in the back for people from the stricken vessel to hang out in while all this is happening. And they can look back at their ship while this is happening. So understand that vessel is in a class of its own at the moment, only touchable by the much soon to be larger Crucible, because they're reworking the Crucible now. But locally, not in quantum with a ship, I would be very curious to test what a size 3 tractor beam can do. My strong suspicion is that if you drop your shield and you need to be moved, say to a safer location that's not involving quantum, this could probably pull you a decent chunk, especially if you're in space. I am not comparing it to the SRV. I'm not saying it's anywhere near as good as that vessel at this job, but I am saying it does add a ton of utility. And the fact I'm even having to make all these addendums and enunciations makes it a sleeper ship that truly is going to be valuable. Although I wouldn't even call it a sleeper. There's a lot of people buying them for a very good reason. They're going to be a good ship. And don't forget, you don't have to buy every single ship. You can buy these in game. You can work towards them in game. If you don't have anybody to play with, hit me up. My Discord's redj #0001. I talk with people all the time. Since the last time I said this in a video, somebody literally comboed me, I think it was yesterday, and I had a great conversation with them. I'll fly with you. I don't care. I've got tons of ships to play with. And while I'm on that topic, I'm just one person. There's plenty of orgs out there. Pick one in your time zone, and you'll find some great people to fly with too. And then you can start picking and choosing the ships that you buy and earn in game alongside them. Now, with all that wonderful talk about earning in game out of the way, I do need to mention something important. We just found out that 3.17.4 is going to be the latest patch for IAE time zone, which is, by the way, coming up in just a month or less. And unfortunately, 3.17.4, while it is not having a wipe, the patch right afterwards, 3.18, is confirmed to have a wipe. So what I want you to keep in the back of your mind is that if you have buying game goals right this minute, I would buy smaller ships. I would start picking up things that are reasonable for, say, the next few months, and then just call it. You don't want to burn yourself out and then end up with a ship that gets wiped, and then you have to re-earn it. Now, CIG in the past has been very generous with the money. millions of UEC issued out to people who play the live server, not the PTU, unfortunately. More on that in a little bit. And that is kind of something to keep in the back of your mind, though, about buying in game. Longer term, CIG intends to have these multiple large patches go through without a wipe. So things that you have purchased in game should last considerably longer. It's all part of the long-term persistence testing, which Tony Z and his finance and number crunching and AI crew are trying to get right and get perfect. And the difficulty, though, is that there's these underlying technologies that require wipes. And in the past, people were abusing the system very, very, very effectively. Hundreds of millions of UEC is some of the screenshots I saw from people I definitely believe, unfortunately, that we've seen people flaunting. And there is some things to be said. However, in 3.18, with rumored to be full Gen 12 integration, and then also confirmed to be the full PES kind of treatment and changing the entire system over to this new system, I would say that I understand why the wipe is justified in this circumstance and necessary. So I didn't want to start sending people on this path of just buy everything in game, and their goal right this minute is going to be starting to buy a reclaimer, and then they go, hey, Red J told me to go buy a reclaimer in game, and now my funds got wiped. So purchase short-term goals now, enjoy them for the next couple months, have a great time. And on the topic of PTU, there are two major things going on coming up. The PTU for 3.17.4 and also the IAE Festival and event and Intergalactic Aerospace Expo is for everyone to have a great time and shoot Nerf darts at each other and have a blast. I will be attending both. I'm going to be doing the IAE and also, of course, diving deep into the PTU. CIG should be rolling out the PTU for 3.17.4 very, very, very soon. As a reminder, usually the lobby of the IAE event and the Expo Center and a lot of the maps and such are visible. You can't go into the sales floor until right beforehand to test those. Usually, and that's actually a nice thing they did last year. In previous years, they didn't even allow you to go into the floors at all before the event started. But I look forward to those, and if I run into any of you, it'll be really fun. Once in a blue moon, I do run into people that recognize me and chat me up and have a blast kind of exploring all the different ships. So if I see you there, great. If I don't, either way, I wish you all fly safe, and thank you again for sticking around this long. If you haven't already, please subscribe. If you know anybody who could use this video, please share it, and thank you again for sticking around.